Well, there they are. There we go. Alright, so there we are. And this is actually the part I wanted us all to be, where you then notice that we are this close to those birds. And I will then be proceeding right way down there to get this restaurant laid and ready. Now that all the doors and windows are open, the visitors can then have their lunch. And I will actually say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that it's hard to lay the restaurant, to find them temporarily on me. Please do not disturb that man. I'll ask you to get one of the longest videos, so my job is to work. And as it is now, let me get right straight down with you. Well, there they are, ladies and gentlemen, this bread are now enjoying this specially prepared lunch, which comes in the form of chicken today. And as I had been saying, that there are definitely two species that will be down here. You notice that we have in the bigger ones, is actually short, thick black beaks. Those are the white-backed vultures, and the smaller ones that hang on the edges of the feeding arena with their pink heads, narrower and longer beaks, are the hooded vultures. And the marabou standing up there and taking guard of what's happening here. And there's one that's actually, or two that are actually in the restaurant, because those guys will actually wait for these birds, the vultures, to tear off those big pieces which the marabou can actually pick and swallow whole. But you might be asking yourself to say, why are these guys feeding these birds here? Is it because they do not have enough food out in the wild? Not really. These birds do get enough food out there, but their population is what is worried us much. They should find that their population has been actually found dropping year in, year out. And hence with that, studies were carried out to ascertain the reason why that population has dropped that much. And us human beings, they've actually been found at the top of the list. How do we then affect the vulture population? We build these big structures, for instance, our hotels and lodges. Some of them were done in areas where these birds would nest. And once you disturb their nesting cycle, and the vulture is a bird that only has one young per year, it will then mean that if all these that are down here would have young ones, for that year, this is the same number who they were, which is really a massive number. And hence,
you find that would have affected their population. After having come up with your load, you then need electricity power to run your gadget, which would then mean you have to call in the power electric company, or the professor in our case, and they have to draw in those lines. But how do they hang them? They have to erect those poles, which stand at about 12 meters, and meaning that those lines that will hang on that will be running at such a height. Now looking at a Vulture, it's a heavy bag, where we're looking at 4 to 5 kilograms, a wide wingspan of about 1.7 meters, and it depends on earth amounts to soar around. So as it soars, and once it sees that line, it won't be able to change direction. And hence most of these birds just find themselves onto those electric lines and got electrocuted. And how about for the few lucky ones, who after having bumped onto the line, the height at which that line runs, it will definitely, when this bird actually lands on the ground, he will definitely lose or break his leg or a wing, which will then mean he cannot take off. That then renders them to the small cats, who are then going to be able to quickly kill them and feed on them. That would also have affected the vulture population. The farmers were also looked at, where we're saying that if a farmer wakes up early in the morning, he's walking around his farm, he's checking on his cattle, finding one or two having been killed by a predator, to him it's a great loss. And as the first thing he thinks of is getting rid of that predator. But the method he's going to apply is what affects the vulture population, because he visits his nearby pharmaceutical company to go buy poisonous stuff to come less that carcass, hoping the predator will come finish up its kill at night. But who is there first during the day? It will be the vultures. And with the way these birds feed, actually, it will then mean that this whole flock can actually die from one, the carcass. That's mass killing. That would have affected their population. Two other scenarios that we did look at was from the fact that if all these birds say they had babies back in their nests, and now they're actually out fending for those young ones, and looking at this carcass that the farmer would have actually left it with that poisonous stuff, if the poison isn't that strong, it will then mean that these birds will actually feed, load their crop, fly back to their nest to go regurgitate, feeding their young ones with poison stuff, killing them in the process while they die on later. And how about if the poison was so strong that after having fed, they all die on the feeding ground? It would then mean that the young ones back in the nest are also going to die. That's of starvation. That greatly affects the population. The poachers, on the other hand, they also looked at, where we're saying that if a poacher were to look at his food reserve and say to himself, maybe in a week or two I'll have run out of food, surely as a man, why should he wait? He has to make a plan. But what plans can poachers do? It's only to sneak into game parks and hunt elephant. Now he decides to sneak into this game park, say midnight, because he expects everybody to be in bed. Lucky he does that. He is in this game park now and he's walking about. He doesn't come across an early throughout the night. Say early morning, he finds one beautiful tusker, shoots, kills it. But in the process of extracting the tusk, these birds would have spotted him. They will then start circling. You find some resting in nearby trees. And what would then happen if a national park ranger was to drive past near that side? He will definitely say something is happening there, let me go check. Only to find a poacher at work who then gets shot. Now, the poachers have turned around to say, we sneaked into this game park that was midnight, we hoped everybody was in bed. How did this ranger find us? The vultures. So what they then do, after extracting the tusk, they less those carcasses with poison for these birds to come feed in their numbers and die so much that in the near future hunt they won't have as many spices as they have had. That is also been seen to affect the population. And as for us here at Victoria Falls Safari Lodge, after looking at all those factors, we say to ourselves, when are these birds going to enjoy the life that human beings are enjoying? And as we came up with this idea of building them this restaurant, which we call the Vulture Restaurant. And now there is a motto that actually runs this restaurant where we say the Vulture Culture. It is a special restaurant really when each and every time I'm coming down here. Because I started by looking at various parts that these birds have, the talons, which I found to be weak, the legs, they aren't that strong as compared to the able leg, and surely if you're looking at the wings, they're so wide, it can enable them to lift that heavy body, which will then mean they need to have strong bones as well. The hooded vulture with that cleanly shaven head, which makes it look more like a monk, and that big, which they can actually use to prod in between the joints where the other vultures really pull get to. All those things were actually fascinating. And finally, I looked at the eyes. I found that all those birds have a small eye in relation to their body size. And from those eyes, I found that they have a very, very good eyesight. Because I did get an article that was done by one birder who said that the vulture is soaring at approximately 100 meters above ground. It can clearly see a 6-centimeter object on the ground. And I thought that was good sight. And when I went on trying to check further as to the sighting, I got a book that was done by one birder by the name of Canopy. This book, a bit about the bush for birds, where he says that the highest flying vulture was struck by a jetliner that was approximately 10,300 meters above the ground. That was in West Africa. And I then said to myself, that must be very, very good. So when I go down here, I look at those birds again and say to myself, if the Lord God were to give me power to just have 10 of them, dot them in a straight line, surely they're 10.3 kilometers apart. But they've covered about 103 kilometers of good sighting. It's just 10 birds. And what about the number that was down here? If you were to scatter them that much, it's a huge area that these birds would have covered. And that's how they come across those carcasses. And by the time they see this dead animal, they change their pattern of flight to trigger the next bird to follow suit. Reasons being, they have to get down there as quickly as possible. Because if you imagine a night when hyenas were out there hunting and they never got anything, now come morning, they're now so hungry and the sun is beginning to heat up. Surely, most of these animals wouldn't actually do their part. They'll find a shady place to lie down the whole day waiting for the next hunting hour. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, they're up onto their feet, stretching themselves, looking aside. They might actually see these birds dropping, and they will definitely know that something is happening there. Let's go check. And they start rushing towards. So the longer these birds take to get to the kill, what will then happen? The hyenas will take over, and they tend to lose out. So they need to get down there as quickly as possible and get on feeding. And hence, with that, you find that hyenas, these vultures have actually been blessed with another good adaptation, where a single vulture is said to be able to eat up to 1.5 kilograms of meat in between 2 and 5 minutes, of which I don't think any one of us here can eat at that rate. And if you were to tell me you can, before you start, I'll ask you to wait a bit whilst I find an ambulance for you, because definitely, something will be going wrong. And that's actually how good these birds are. And for you guys, if you like hanging around the African savannas, I'll ask you to be very, very strong, because if you were to succumb and we take 10-15 minutes without finding you, surely you would have gone. Because the hyenas, the vultures, will quickly chop you into small pieces. What about those hyenas that were on the run? They'll actually deal with the skeletal part, because hyenas would actually like crunching on the bones, which would then mean that you'll be said to have been disappeared, yet not. These wild cleaners would have done their best part. All right, disease eradication. Yes, these birds have actually done a great job in those lines. Where I got a book that was done by one lady, Veronica Ruth, where he actually points out period the 1945, when there was the Second World War. She says that there was a disease that was known as rinderpest, and it is a disease that's believed to have originated in Russia. But how did it get down here? When the Russian troops that were engaged in those battles in Africa wanted the beef supplies, Russia would send live cattle. And those were actually slaughtered down here in Africa. And that's how that disease got down here. It was really a vicious disease that almost wiped out all animals in Africa. And it could have spread to us human beings, but we didn't get that. Why was that so? It is because we had these beautiful friends where whenever such an animal died, they quickly moved in and cleared it up. What's happening nowadays in sub-Saharan Africa? We still have anthrax. We still have foot and mouth disease. All those are diseases that we can contract. But why not? It's because these birds are there to take care of us. And as I will say that the vultures have actually been taking care of us for a long, long time. Why then don't we do the same and look after them? The special birds. The marabou, where are they? Look at them. Yeah, very understanding. Before maybe they take off this, like a quick run on that hairstyle I was talking about. Beautiful. It looks the same. So I don't know who's this barber who does that for them.
So when you feed them like this, do they all get something?
Survival of the fittest, man. Survival of the fittest. Similarly, out in the wild there, if it's not strong enough, you won't get anything. And we're still, what we're giving them is just a snack.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if we were to actually fuel them, they won't do the job one day to clean up all the data. So that's actually one way of getting them used to this restaurant in order for them to be sufficient here. But they actually have to go find something else. The marabouts, as they stand there, look at them, they do have whitish legs. But when we were looking at that picture, I believe we did notice that they had grayish black legs. What would have happened for them to actually change those grey black legs white? Who can give a good guess? Well, there is actually a process they use to regulate their body temperature, which we call neurohydrosis. This is whereby when he feels like regulating his body temperature, he just passes his droppings onto those thin long legs. And as the droppings dry, it has two effects, two cooling effects. That's cooling by evaporation, which will be the first. And the second one, I would say maybe these birds got to the classes that I went to. Because I remember my science teacher would always say that black substances will absorb heat, whereas white substances will reflect heat. And there comes the marabou. Grey black legs as its original coloration, but he quickly turns them white in order to reflect heat. Isn't that a good way of regulating their body temperature? The belly feathers, as I said initially, as the sun or the heat bounces or the ground emits the heat, it actually bounces onto that white coloration, which is really another good way these birds would regulate their temperature. And they will hang that poach, which I described as a tie, which is what we call the gula poach. They use that as well to regulate their body temperature because that can be inflated or deflated. If he feels like changing his body temperature, he just inflates it. And once inflated, it exposes a lot of blood vessels, which can absorb or lose heat, depending on what he wants to do. That's another good way of doing things. Special bird, as I initially said, very good eyesight as well, that they also have that big, designed not for cutting, but for picking fish and frogs.
They speak their wings.
The wings, as if, are they not saying thank you very much for the lunch? Not really. You notice that these birds have actually been in that scram. So they're pushing and shoving each other, which then means that their body temperature has risen. Now they're trying to cool themselves. That's actually how they do it. And when they feel like absorbing heat, you might find them lying down as if dying. That actually means that as the ground emits heat, it burns into it. And when there is a mite that it's sucking, it's blood, which you can tell exactly where it is. By lying down, the mite gets burnt by the heat, and it will try to change position. As it does so, then the vulture can definitely say, this is the guy who was troubling me. He can pluck him off easily. All right. Getting to a feeding site late, they do actually use that posture, spread wings, because he'll be trying to make himself look big and drive other guys away from the kill. Then he can also have something to chew. The clever birds. And you will notice that